the intent of this panel is essentially because these are folks, who run tech businesses. We want to understand from them on things that have worked for them, haven't worked for them. So as startups, as wannabe entrepreneurs, as you kind of look to, either use the tech stack or kind of take decisions, technology-based decisions at your startups, we can obviously learn from them, right? And not repeat those same mistakes. And if things have worked well for them, obviously kind of replicate to kind of ensure your businesses succeed as well. So for the first 15 to 20 odd minutes, we'll kind of have a high-level themes that pretty much cover what I just spoke about. And we'll leave the last 5 to 10 minutes for questions that you think are unanswered after our discussion, and we'll open it up for the floor. Right? So before we get started, I know that Karan gave a quick intro, but if you can kind of quickly talk through each of your companies and what you do. Rohit, can we start with you?
Hey all, so we run a startup called MTW Labs. We are a tech accelerator. Our primary focus is to help non-tech founders build tech products. So if any non-tech founder has an idea and is looking for a tech partner, we build the tech partner to we will be the tech partner to them. We build the product to them, and we'll be there in an 18-month long journey to help them go to that next level. We help them set up a team, and from there on they can take it up. That's primarily our focus. And to keep our paycheck and cash flows running in, we also do outsource product development just to make sure that, because the startups we might not exit until the next 2-3 years. So that's what we do. Primary tech stack being around JavaScript and all, and on the cloud we use both DigitalOcean and AWS. We have teams in AI, ML, and blockchain as well. We're coming up with an auction, blockchain-based auction platform very soon. I'll hand it over to.
So we essentially understand user behavior from apps, websites, and back office systems, and then are able to target that user at the right time with the right message. So basically, customers like Redbus, Swiggy, BigBasket. So these are the kind of customers. Any B2C company is actually can be a customer of us. And then, if I have to talk about the tech stack, so mostly Node.js based as of now. So yeah, previously it was Python. We migrated to Node.js. We'll talk more about it.
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder of a company called Medical Lab. So we have got a SaaS product called SmartWinner. It's a gamified platform for sales enablement. So essentially helps sales reps to be at the top of the knowledge curve through a combination of short quizzes and Twitter-like feeds. So we work with Fortune 500 companies like Boston Scientific, Abbott, Polycom, FedEx, just to name a few. So SmartWinner is being used by companies in more than 25 countries in multiple languages. Our tech stack is a mean tech stack, so MongoDB, Angular, Node.js. We are planning to shift to React, but that's something we will discuss during the session maybe.
Sure. Thanks for that. So I know that each of you touched upon the tech stacks component, right? So without going into the specifics of which tech stack itself, if I were to kind of broadly look at the framework, right, for kind of taking a decision on, hey, this is the tech stack that makes sense for me. And I know on this panel we have a mix of both folks looking at it from a tech angle as well as a business angle. And as founders, who are also interested in ensuring that there are, returns for the investments that you make, what's your framework like while kind of choosing a tech stack?
So for me, it was I was a Python programmer for a long time and then a PHP guy. But when we started this, we wanted to make sure we pick the right tech stack. Being a programmer for a long time, I've seen Node.js picking up a lot, and I felt that 3-4 years down the line, we'll have a lot of people, available on the stack. One important fact being, there's close to 10 to 12 million of front-end JavaScript developers available in the market, who are looking to, plug into the back-end ecosystem as well and become a full-stack guy. And JavaScript enables that. So we thought it will be very easy to find the talent in the market, one. Then two, to train a guy, any fresher or a guy to teach JavaScript and then make him a full-stack developer, the learning curve is pretty much, lean. So these are two decisions which helped us pick JavaScript as a tech stack. Then again, there were a few problems as well, which we will discuss as we move forward in the session. But the one major thing was 3 years down the line, which is that tech stack where the entire talent pool is available, one. And two, what is the learning curve for that particular tech stack?
Sure.
Yeah. So while Rohit spoke more about availability of engineers in that tech stack, so I'll touch upon more of we are like I said, we serve all companies like BigBasket, Swiggy, Redbus. So we have huge traffic coming into our servers. So, I mean, when we did a benchmark of, I mean, first we were at Python, so it basically starts with me writing code when we start up, so it basically starts with the language that I'm familiar with. So that is how probably it starts everywhere. And then now when we had to scale, so what would happen is every 6 months our data would double. So the kind of customers we taken plus the amount of the growth of each of these companies, actually we had to double our, I mean, the amount of data, the amount of processing power, we actually had to double. And when we did a benchmark, we actually, each of our servers, I mean, we have servers in DigitalOcean, Linode and Hesner. So each of the servers would have to handle 100,000 concurrent connections. So that's the kind of scale that we operate even now at. But Python would actually hit 100% usage when you're actually using, at that scale. But Node.js, it typically touches 12%, 13%, which was an amazing difference for us. So we actually migrated, within 3 months, we rewrote all the backend of, from Python to Node.js. So that is, so basically you will, I mean, if we had to actually make the decision early, better, we would have actually thought through, did some benchmarking, and then selected the stack. So there are two factors that will be weighing, which are weighing against each other. Time to go to market, which is where familiarity kicks in. I mean, if you are familiar, you are faster to market. But the other thing is, will the language scale, will the frameworks available in that language scale? So you'll have to actually weigh these properly and then take a decision. So
just a follow-up question to that, Kishore. So in retrospect, so if you were to have taken this decision of going with Node.js on day one, right, outside of familiarity with Python, what platforms would you have looked at in terms of seeking this feedback? You know, there are a lot of online portals where devs come and share their experiences. Would you have looked to some of those channels? So what kind of sources would you have looked to know Node.js would have been a better choice for you on day one?
I mean, probably Google search, Stack Overflow, probably DigitalOcean communities. So these would be the places where we would look at. But one unique positioning that we have is the kind of scale that we handled, being able to handle hundreds of thousands of connections on a single server. We actually did not get much information from the market, and it's very hard to test at that scale. So the testing environment that you need to create itself costs you. So that is a major problem. So until you had that kind of traffic from your own clients, we actually had to do real-time testing on the clients. So that's the kind of thing, you can't invest that kind of money being a startup to do the testing, fire up 20 machines, push up connections from all those to the servers and all. So so that's how it has been. So mostly probably theoretical knowledge can be coming in from the communities, but then if you have to be sure, you have to do the testing. So
I think just to add on to the question which you've asked, that Stack Overflow does this annual review, and that's a great barometer of what's going to come, and you can see how kind of Angular 1 fell into disuse, and React went up and Vue.js went up, and similarly how Node went up, and maybe it's a good way to just look at as some of the panelists are talking about how it will pan out in the next 2 to 3 years. But looking beyond that, at a startup, I think will be kind of thinking ahead of the game, definitely. So in terms of tech stack, our primary initiative, when we started off, essentially was, can we very quickly do a turnaround? The way it started, our first customer was a Fortune 500 customer, but we needed to show them something in 7 days time, right? Just to kick off a POC and then get into the immediate business. And the mean stack is very easy to use, and you can actually have a pretty good a basic setup running in 1 day's time, and in 6 days you can kind of create a POC. So that was our whole idea, and I would say from a startup perspective, time to market matters. That's one of the differentiators between a startup and a established player. So if they go to a TCS, maybe they will say it will take 3 months for us to do a POC. We'll say, okay, today is the meeting, 7 days I will show you what we want to see, right? So I think that could be an important aspect. But as and when you then develop, and as and when the way it turned out that all of our kind of customers are in the regulated market, so we need to have some other bells and whistles. But that way, that can wait. Once you have the money, once you have the traction, then you can obviously re-engineer your tech stack.
Sure. So I know that here again you represent a mix of both talking to your end clients as well as making decisions for yourselves. How much of very often we hear that every time there's a buzzword, right? So the bunch of buzzwords that are out there today. How do you kind of desist yourself from saying, hey, this is something that I need to work on in my project? So be it pitching to an investor and all of that. I know that it has its own amount of interest when you have those buzzwords as part of your pitch. How important is, let's say there's a new tech stack on the block, to incorporate that as part of what you're building? Or let's say if you don't think that's the right thing for you, to say a strong no and not waste your time and effort in actually exploring that? Have you encountered that in your startups, and how do you kind of deal with that?
Because I was known for most of the people who know me as a Python programmer. The moment I said I'm doing on JavaScript, people said a lot of projects on Python were coming to me. For me to convince them, no, Python is not the right tech stack for the web. That is something good for AI and ML and not for web. It was a tough time to convince. But then we've decided 3 years, JavaScript is the only thing we are going to do. So we have started rejecting projects on Python, PHP. So first 6 months was tough. But then we found our niche and we became subject matter experts in JavaScript, and now people come to us for the JavaScript part. So that's one part. The other part, when I went to investors, is being in the emerging tech, and I go to a startup. When people come to the accelerator program, they come with a baggage. See, the non-tech founders as well do some research on, well, they read it and they come to me, no, Python is good. No, because I am a Python programmer, I know, but JavaScript is much better because we have tried it ourselves. So to add to the point that, how do we pick it? If you have to choose between two things, the best thing is to try it once. Rather than going and depending on a platform like Stack Overflow, though the entire world is driving, driven based on the data there. The other part is whether that tech stack will fit into your use case is something which is more important. So at that point, maybe you can do a POC in a month, hire a guy, do it quickly, and then understand what's the difference, and are you able to benchmark it quickly.
Any other thoughts that you all have?
So basically, whenever a new technology comes in, you know what it is, what its base uses are. So if you talk about blockchain, basically it is a decentralized, auditing system. So if auditing doesn't fit into your product, there is no need of looking at that product. That is what I believe. So now that we've been in this field for 8 years, we tend to understand now if there is deep learning coming in. Deep learning is being picked up by very many companies, and it fits for us. So deep learning is where you actually can do very good ML with if you have a lot of data, which we have, you'll be able to do much better predictions with less computing power in that sense. So which we have, so that fits into us. So we try and tend to experiment with it. Then there is this planetary scale file systems that are coming, IPFS. You can look at them. So those are also not useful for me. So I can make that decision. So being a founder, having seen things, you'll be able to make those decisions. So it's unnecessary for you to get carried away.
Right. So a follow up to that, right? So you indicated that deep learning is one thing that, for example, your startup, it made sense. So compared to your daily work schedule, your team's work schedule, right? How do you decide what percentage of your time should a team spend on an up and coming technology to see if it applies to your business? In this case, deep learning, what would be a proportion?
I'll actually give you what I have done. So basically, I understood that this is going to change the way marketing is going to happen. So once that intuition has been built, so now I understand what amount of information do I need to know to drive my team. I don't need to be doing everything, but I need to be able to counter them or advise them when they are going in the wrong track. So I need to build that kind of intuition on where deep learning works, what are the kind of problems it can solve. So if I try and do the required reading, I have actually developed my own models also, until I get that intuition. Once that is there, then it's team's job. Then the team has to take it over. I'm only a guiding factor there. So that is essentially where it starts and ends.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I spend every Sunday, reading up on technology, on obviously on business side of things. But I'm a techie at heart. So though my role currently obviously is driving the business things, but and I always get attracted by the new shiny toys. And it's my co-founder who always says, does it make sense right now to go from platform A to platform B? So I think we always have to be conscious about that, because toys are innumerous, but time is only limited, right? So but at the same time, if you keep on reading and if you are keeping regularly plugged into the system, you will get a sense where the market is moving. There is no one article which will tell this market is moving in this way, but if you are continuously keeping yourself updated, you will know how one thing is going down, another is coming up, what are the different opportunities. The other thing is that in terms of technology, is it going to help either reducing cost, right, in terms of developer time reduce or something like that, or will it add some specific benefit to my customer which my competitors are not giving? So like machine learning, again, there's a lot of use case, and the use case which I can talk about within my organization, that's a very specific use case in a sales enablement platform. I don't think maybe other guys are doing it. So it could be a differentiator, and it might be worth spending a lot of time creating this moat for you, right? And just to be, if you are 3 months or 6 months ahead of the competition, you get a lot of the market for yourself. So that's something we have to be aware of. So it's a balancing act, absolutely.
Thank-
We started on the hack night internally, wherein every second Friday in a month, we have, the team assembles. We sit on the night and discuss the emerging tech. So everyone will come up with, we have a small plugin we use in Angular. We try to do the same thing in React and see if there's something not available. Let's try and decode it. How is it working? So we are trying to do this again, but it's pretty tough to take emerging tech to the employees because they come with a mindset. They are already used to it. They think that next 2 years I'm doing Angular, and you suddenly ask them to do React. It's a tough thing to convince them as well. So the best thing is you'll have to be the core team should be able to counter them and tell them this is what it is. To just quote, I was interacting with the Groupon core team, and I found that the vice presidents of Groupon still write code today. So that's one good culture which would actually help, to keep the employees with the emerging tech.
And talking about just training and hiring the right folks, right? I know the discussion is focused on tech, but what are some of the best practices that you have in hiring tech folks, right? What's worked, what's not worked for each of you?
I have a different model in hiring. So I was just discussing with them as well. So we try to be that company where we have got 100% retention. So we don't go to recruitment agencies and all. We do meetups. We go talk to people. While we evangelize things. So if you're meeting, maybe you, if you feel that you're right fit for us, we start discussing with you. We become friends. 3-4 months we observe you, and then we see if you also feel that we are a right fit, and then we start it.
Evaluated right now.
Yeah, then we slowly start discussing it. Right. So it's a different approach because that way, this 3-4 month journey will help both of us understand where the company is heading and where you want to go. And if it actually, we have a small Excel sheet where I put all the details into it. And then if it's coming above 8 of the 10, then I say, no, this is the guy to pick in. Then I go start targeting him. The next 2 months I'll get him on board. That's what I'm doing. So we got 40 people into the team in the last 1 year, all acquired in the same pattern.
What about you?
So basically, I mean, we're not as evolved as Rohit in that sense. So initial call, we'd actually try and understand, how his general attitude, aptitude is. But then we'll do a half a day or a single day kind of a, app building exercise. If he's a JavaScript or a front end kind of a guy, if he's a back end kind of a guy, then we try and give him one of the exercises that we have done ourselves. We know how much time it takes and what's the kind of aptitude required for that. So he has to do actually the real world kind of assignments, and then if he's done through, then we actually go ahead and hire him. So the thing is, in the last 3-4 months, probably 6 months, our hiring rate has actually increased a lot. So we're growing fast, we're expanding outside, so we had to hire fast. So because of that, I mean, we tend to complete our interviews in 2 days. So in 2 days, we actually give out an offer and then close the deal.
So for us, either it's through a obviously normal interview process, everything is there. So we have two different processes. One is for the interns, right? So for freshers, we definitely have them as part of a say a 3-month internship period. We pay them full salary during that, but that's the evaluation time, and not all of them kind of make into the actual job role. Even for experienced people, and typically we don't take someone more than 5 years of experience because the technology itself is changing. So someone with 3 years of experience, we find that the willingness to change the mind, that's a big problem, because we had a certain way of doing things and we want everyone to do things. That may not be the best way, but that's our way of doing things, and we want everyone to be focused on that way of doing things. So even for a experienced person, after the initial interview, if we are convinced, we actually ask them to come over, work with us for 5 days. We pay for the travel, we pay a remuneration for that 5 days, and we have seen that after we have taken that approach, there has been zero rejection in terms of once we have offered someone, he also likes, if he agrees the offer, he feels that this is the right kind of environment, and then there has been an immediate fit. In the past, we have seen if we immediately take someone who might be a great programmer but who is not fitting culturally with the team, so then we might have to take a difficult decision 6 months down the line.
Right. Sure. Also, talk about tools and stacks that you all choose for your business, right? What component or what percentage of what you use is open source in the respective businesses, and how do you kind of choose to go after or adopt an open source technology in your businesses?
100% open source. So we don't use anything which is closed source. So every time, even for example, so there's a small thing which needs to be added. Maybe there's an AngularJS plugin which is there. So a good proxy obviously is the kind of GitHub score is a number of stars which are there. So you can then judge what is the best way. But as a matter of principle and policy, we don't have anything which is like closed source, cost definitely, a community support, and the security aspect. These are the three things which kind of drive us towards.
Sure. Kishore and Rohit.
So other than the top layer, everything is open source. I mean, whatever we have added, other than that, everything is typically open source. We don't use any closed source. I mean, we are not that kind of guys.
We bumped into some project management tools recently like Jira and all where we have to pay, there is no choice. But otherwise, everything is open source.
Those are still fine. I mean, we're talking about our own stack. I mean, we use, GitHub is in that sense closed source. Right.
Otherwise, we as well are, we prefer open source because it gives you that advantage to change the things, flip the things any moment, any time, no friction.
And I think sometimes we go, like for example, our we use GitLab, so it's like self-hosted. So a lot of stuff we use actually open source, which is self-hosted, which takes some time away. I know, because we can just pay $5 per month and get things done. So that's also not a bad strategy. Sometimes it might be easier to do. But if there is a good open source thing available, and the team is sophisticated enough to kind of do all the tweakings, so maybe that's so you can go ahead with that.
What has been some of the pitfalls, right? So as you've evolved into where you are today, what are some of the things that you all have learned through your own mistakes?
One was picking React Native because we picked JavaScript, the obvious choice was React Native for mobile and we picked it. Then we realized there's not many resources available, it was tough to get into it, no support from the people who created it. So it's been tough 8 to 9 month journey after picking it up because we started doing it for 8-9 clients, and there were scenarios where we were unable to take a 7-8 screen app to live for almost 4 months. Now we figured out a way to do it. Now we started building a team which is actually focusing on only React Native, building our own plugins. Even support is still in a very bad state, but the ecosystem is evolving. That's a good thing.
Number of developers available for React is
very less, quite a less number, and the fact that the React for web and React Native for mobile are completely different, quite opposite, is again a very tough thing to. A lot of people think that React and React Native are both together, but it's completely on a quite opposite thing. And for those companies who picked up React, again, Google suddenly bumped in and came out with Angular 2 and 4, copycat all the React features. Now even enterprise clients are not sure whether to go with Angular 2 or should pick React. So that jargon is, the confusion is still continuing. But that's one tough decision we made which affected our growth. But we didn't have a choice. Now we are exploring native script as an alternative, native script. So this come out of Hyderabad only. There's a company called Progress Software here in iLabs, and they have come out with a thing which is alternative to React Native. But this is again based on Angular. So those who understand a bit of Angular can actually do this on mobile using native script. It's an experiment again. We're not sure. Yeah.
But more conceptually, without necessarily naming a specific stack, what are some of the learnings that you have had as you have evolved?
So one thing that we were actually trying to do when we were early was, for the traffic we had very early, we could write our own tools. I mean, in fact, we actually kind of developed our own columnar database, which had indexes and all that. So it was not going to scale, obviously. So the idea was, I mean, either we spend efforts on developing it further, making it more robust, or we find an open source solution. Or for that matter, we were even okay for a closed source solution at that time. So because the traffic was growing so fast, our clients would leave us if we don't create something which is stable very quickly. So for that, I think at that time when we made the decision to write our own tool, which was our own columnar store, we did not have any open source solution. But then 6 months down the line, an open source solution has come up. So actually, it was at that time we redid the evaluation of all the solutions available, and then the current stack is very stable. So I mean, one thing that I had inherently was that let us try and innovate in the technology space. So it was like we developing our own block storage. So you understand, right? So try and tend to not do those kind of things, because your mainline business will get affected when you are trying to optimize on other things which are not important for you. So that's the essential the rule of SaaS. So you can pay a little and then get all the required tools, and then your main business is what you should be concentrating on. Being a tech guy, it was a learning for me. So in 1.5 years, we had that kind of mindset that we'll build everything. Then it didn't work out. So we now are using solutions. Now the tech stack is very stable in that sense. So that is one learning that I had.
I think for us, two things which stands out. Number one is this mentality of premature optimization. So let's make this the best solution possible. Okay, if there are a million
This is something that I have to fight with my team every day, because they try and optimize a feature. They want to optimize a feature which may not be there 1 year down the line, and this optimization that you're doing will only help after 1 year. So I mean, I have seen that, but it's hard for you to explain that to the tech team. So because they want it to be the best, what comes out from their team has to be the best.
Absolutely. So now we realize that there is a natural progression. On day one, you cannot create an enterprise grade software. It cannot happen in 6 months. It can never happen, right? So there is and as and when you are also, going through the journey, you are learning more about the customer needs. So ultimately, the development has to be driven by the customer needs than our vanity. Now it's very difficult to say because we have the ego. Let's make it foolproof, this and that. But that's something we have to consciously step aside. The other thing, initially we were not focused at all in automated testing. So because it was a small project, we want quick turnaround time. So chalo, let's test, and that created a lot of regression issues later on, where we are not sure, because now it's a big beast, and you don't know what's going to happen if you make some changes. So I think that's something which we should try to do from day one, which is automated testing. And I think there is a developer mentality where we say ki, we are only writing codes. Test cases, we don't want to write test cases. That's for someone else, right? But I think that paradigm is definitely changing, and it has to change a lot if we want to create robust, scalable solutions for the long run.
Kishore brought up an important point in terms of the build versus buy debate, right? That typically happens in most of us. Between Rohit and you, have you faced that any time as to what component of your application do you need to build internally versus potentially use an external existing solution?
Definitely. So anything which we felt was our core IP, again, we have been focused in terms of quick go to market, right? So whatever is our core IP, that definitely needs to be built, right? Now in buy, obviously if it's open source, then there is no question. But now we also realize that to run a business, for example, it's not just your product, but 200 other things which are there, right? So if there is something which can automate and make our lives easier, we are willing to pay for that, as long as that's not core part of our business. But it also has been a philosophical debate. So it has been 2 to 3 years for me to kind of understand that it's okay to buy. For us, it's from a techie point of view, let's build it, it will take 2 months. Acha, POC ho jayega, some small thing. But ultimately, it eats up a lot of bandwidth and moves your focus away from the business.
So the build time can actually be lesser, but the time you take to maintain it, there are bugs that come out, the mind space that's basically used. So as you grow in the organization, as you start, the organization becomes bigger, the mind space is actually going to become more important. So the less things that you need to worry about, the better things that you can actually concentrate on.
We had some similar issue with Angular. It doesn't support SEO well, so the team was trying to solve it. 10 days there, Initially, we also bumped into a tool called pre-render, which does it at 1 cent or 2 cent. But we thought, why shouldn't we build it on our own? That the guys were much enthusiastic. 15 days later, we realized that we'll go back to pre-render. Those things happen. But from a programmer perspective, doing code reviews very regularly will also help at a good level, because after we go to production is when we realize our code is pretty bad, and then you come back and rewrite the entire stuff. That's one thing which is a pitfall which we can avoid much earlier.
I think we've covered a broad set of themes. Anything else that you'll want to question to any specific panelist?
So when you go to cloud stack, right, are you kind of using all these latest container things and all that?
So we tried using Docker Swarm, but it meddled with all IP tables. I don't know why IP tables had to meddle. So it actually created a lot of issues for us, and then we are right now not yet doing it. That's where we are. And our services are typically, we don't have so many services that you need to actually scale. So we are not doing it right now, but probably we'll move to it later.
We're doing it for a couple of our clients, but again, the concept of containerization as a whole is also stabilizing now. But you'll see a lot many people going that way down the line. So a lot of people are talking about serverless and all. Janaki was mentioning as well about kubeless. So it's just picking up. There's nothing wrong experimenting. We are doing it for a couple of our clients on Docker. Yeah.
Yeah, same for us. It's again premature at this level. So, we are aware of the development. We are aware of serverless. We have got a few things. Some of the things we have kind of tried to do as a microservice. For some of the decoupled things, it makes sense, but not to extent that we have to kind of move from our current system to that system. The ROI is not so much.
Yeah. So we were discussing a little outside about it, the same thing I want to discuss. How, because you guys are going a lot into development, one attitude which is there for most of it is just the attitude for security. How are you actually looking at it in your development, and what exactly is your efforts to mitigate those?
So in our company, I mean, one of the senior engineers is good enough in security, so he takes care of the questions. He thinks things in that angle and then he solves it. But I understand it may not be 100%. But right now, from an ROI perspective, that's where we are. Typically, a little of chalta hai attitude, I guess.
Yeah, again, that's there in everything we do. That chalta is there, but yeah, we as well do a bit of code review here and there. We just try and see that. But as a part of the Hacknet, I was mentioning in-house, we wanted to start, just bumping into the security of our applications, try hacking it, sort of thing. It might help. But yeah, obviously we look forward to Umesh and Adbase.
Yeah, so just to add, I mean, we actually store a lot of customer data in that sense. So the main core data warehousing system, that's actually fortified in that sense. So other than that, other parts which is a web server or the web app part of it, we actually use JWT JSON Web Token. So all our services are, I mean, you have to provide a JSON Web Token before you can actually access any of the services. So that is where it is right now. But I mean, ours is not a typical two-tier architecture. We have a backend which is taking all the marketing automation work. Then there is a backend for the website, and then there is a website. So there is the third tier is actually very protected in that sense. The other two tiers are not. There is not much data or security or that kind of thing that is required there. That goes down, the data is of no use, exactly. I mean, that is there, but then there is no security risk in that sense.
There is no data breach in the sense your system might go down. And today, most of the cases like with DigitalOcean, maybe with the AWS also definitely, that this all your instances are fungible. So if something goes down, no one cares. In another second, another instance will come up. Hopefully, that should be the way when we are developing a consistent system we have to think about. So
it's like OWASP is what people try to adhere.
Yeah.
So those are the top 10 frequent attacks or detected vulnerabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. So because we most of our customers are in regulated industry, security is something which we take very seriously, and on top of it we have actually a SaaS product. So it's a multi-tenant product but with a logical multi-tenancy. So it's not a physical multi-tenancy, right? So which means that there is a chance of a security breach. There's a reason from day one we have built certain elements within the framework, that even if a developer by mistake writes a code which can take data across multiple tenants, so it will not build. So that thing we have built from day one just to prevent the data contamination. So that was something we had done.
So yeah, I mean, actually the core engineers or the senior engineers who are actually building the system, if they kind of take care of the isolation part, even the smaller engineers who are there cannot actually make those kind of mistakes. So that is where if your baseline is actually protected in that sense.
So that we can't leave to on individual engineer's judgment, like whether he should follow the best practices or something. So that has to be prevented at a framework level basically.
So, and one other thing that happened luckily for us is we have clients in BFSI space. So whenever we have to deploy in their premises or they're using our application, they actually hire a security agency and do all the vulnerability testing. So that's coming free of cost for us in that sense.
So how many of you patched the meltdown so far?
Sorry?
How many of you patched the meltdown so far? Meltdown patch is done or not done?
The meltdown.
So I think DigitalOcean is doing it on its own. The kernel is upgraded. Linode also did the.
All the large vendors have rolled them out, so we didn't have to do anything.
It is on cloud. I mean, unless it's on-premise, if it is there, then the customer will take care of it anyway. So they take the downtimes and they restart the servers, implement the patches.
We'll take one last question. So it's a good plug for the other session that Umesh has in terms of security. Hopefully we learn things from Umesh on what we should and should not do. Yes.
So regarding the operations, I mean, scaling up, how is the performance getting affected in the cloud?
So
especially for the banking operation, where I mean, say, it may be very much important. Does the performance get affected?
Right. So I can kind of take a stab at it, right? So the entire point of moving to the cloud is compared to your traditional DC kind of infrastructure. It gives you the flexibility to scale a lot easily and at a much better price to performance than you would otherwise. So not just DigitalOcean, pretty much every cloud provider that's out there. That's the basic premise with which we operate our systems. But you could share your personal experiences.
So I mean, what I would actually see is the components that you have in your entire architecture. If you scale one of the architecture, it kind of puts, you have to analyze if it kind of puts the kind of network pressure or the processing pressure on any of the other architecture parts. So if that thing is properly taken care, then you'll never have an issue of, when you scale and then seamless scaling doesn't happen. I mean, in the case that Jankiram was showing, you spin up 10 pods of web server and then the number of requests coming in, but then the Mongo is only one. So if you don't scale that, so if you have not thought through that, then there is an issue. So in that sense, you actually, people can, I mean, engineers typically say, we'll increase this instance. The minute that thought comes, they should know that that's going to put a pressure on the next layer of the architecture. So if they don't think that, then you'll have an issue. You scale this part, but then that will crash. So now you have to scale that. So there are some architectural pieces which you cannot probably scale, where you need, for whatever availability, open source, the tool is not available, then you have to build kind of whatever caching layers if that's the solution. So you have to think about that. Otherwise, just scaling the servers won't help.
Thank you. So I'm sure the panelists will be around, and you can certainly network with them over lunch and figure out if there are other unanswered questions for you. Thanks again.